Welcome back to this latest episode. This is our 5th year of Japan's top business interviews, and my guest today is an old friend of mine, Bela Schweiger, who I met when you were running Haagen Dazs, actually,
Yes.
years and years ago. So, Bela, your new company is into Japan,
Yes, correct.
right? And it's doing market entry, that type of thing.
That's correct.
So, using your expertise about Japan to help companies be successful here. So,
Exactly.
as I say, I met you when you were running Haagen Dazs, and I remember, I think it was the FCC I attended. You gave a really good presentation on marketing there. I think as we first met, I remember thinking, wow, this guy really knows about Japan. He really knows about marketing. So it was a very impressive presentation. But just give us a bit of the background. How is it that you got to Japan, and why? I know you're in a different role and you've changed a few times. So how did you get here, and how did you get the head of Haagen Dazs and this thing that you're doing now with the market entry? Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning. Welcome to Tokyo, which is very humid right now and hot.
It's very humid, yeah.
I had many presentations in my life. I gave several interviews. And when you invited me, I was incredibly humbled. I usually am not nervous before things like this. But today I am rather nervous, and the reason is I looked at the amazing, impressive list of guests that you had over 5 years, and I am kind of worried, is there anything else I can add to all those who came before me? But, let's, as we talked before, we probably are of the same last, we fight through. So,
well, it's a good point, Bela, because, I write a blog every Saturday on leadership, and I've released 577 podcasts on that subject. Now, you would think to yourself, after 577 blogs you've released as a podcast, what more is there to say on leadership?
Correct.
This Saturday will be episode number 221 goes out this Saturday. And so you have to think, wow, 221 podcast guests have talked about one topic, leading in Japan. But what I find, though, is that everyone's experience is different and everyone's insights are a little bit different. And there's always something a bit unique or a bit fresh. So don't think that you have any problem to come up with something that's going to be relevant. I know there will be. So how did you get to Japan, and how did you get to become running, Haagen Dazs and that type of thing?
Okay. I am from Hungary. I was born in Hungary. I think I grew up with the best of both worlds. I got, I think at that time, and we are talking about the 70s. So, I sometimes tell people, don't ask me my age, just carbon date me. But, I think at that time, education was incredibly at a high level in the communistic bloc. So I got my initial degrees in Hungary. And then I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to study in the UK. In fact, I was studying in Wales and was there for 2 years. And it
in
was
Wales? Okay, that must have been
Cardiff.
I'd say, Welsh is quite a unique language compared to English. And
it is.
You just see the spelling of place names like, okay, this looks English native speaker. How do you pronounce that, So that must be difficult.
Yes. But also that was the first time in my life when I was really exposed to a very international environment, because students were coming from all over the place. Let's remind ourselves at that time the border came down, the wall came down between East and West. And I was the first batch of the West trying to help people coming from Eastern Europe to get that educational and cultural background. So I had met even people from the Middle East at that time. And later on, I will come back to that point about my career, what gave me the opportunity to move. I am actually moving eastwards from Hungary. So after all that, my first job was in the spirits industry. The company doesn't exist anymore. I mean, exists, but in a different name now. They are called Diageo. At that time, they were still called IDV. And I was managing the first kind of joint venture undertaking. IDV invested into one of the biggest Hungarian manufacturing liquor brand, which is called Unicum, or Unique, as you would say. Then I moved. I got a surprising move to work for L'Oréal for 2 years. And boy, is this a different culture or what?
French culture?
All of a sudden, I was exposed to the French culture. I didn't speak a word of French, but they said, okay, your experience and expertise is needed. So don't worry. First 6 weeks, an incredibly intense French course. 6 hours a day.
Right.
And no books, nothing. They were just kind of talking, and I was forced to do that. And it was an amazing experience because that was a little bit how I also learned to speak English. I was just very interested, and I wanted to immerse myself into the culture. And I remember the long late nights of doing chain learning, which my teacher introduced to us. Look up a word in the dictionary, an English dictionary. Look at the definition and you'll find a word you do not know.
Oh, just keep
go
going.
Go to that, and in that definition, and I did the same, very similar approach to French. When I studied French, I was just interested, and I picked up the language rather okay. The culture was more difficult to break, I have to admit. I struggled at that time with that culture. I just didn't understand what the real expectations were. I couldn't read the French room, if you will. Then all of a sudden I got a call from a recruiter to say the Coca-Cola company is on a major recruitment phase and they are looking for young talent. At that time, the chief marketing officer was Sergio Zeman. He wrote quite a few books about the art of marketing. And he said, recruit 150 new people for me. I want new blood. And I was part of that batch of newcomers. And I still remember to this very day, the first international meeting in Atlanta where Coca-Cola is headquartered. We had this big meeting and Sergio Zeman delivered an amazing speech, a really inspirational speech of what marketing is about. And then he said, okay, any questions? And here comes this, because his message was, you need to think outside the box. And questions. And here is this Hungarian who's like, and Mr. Zeman, can we define the box? And the room went completely silent. And you know, in some cultures, this guy is, you know, he is cooked because Zeman was known for firing people on the spot.
Oh,
so
really?
Yeah, he was relentless about people not doing the proper marketing. So it was like, okay. And Zeman went, okay, that's actually not a bad question. Yeah.
What's the starting point to change?
How can you change anything without understanding it?
Where we are.
Yes. And the party after, Bela, exactly the question I wanted to ask. Great. So all of a sudden, you were kind of, okay, he's the outsider. And then all of a sudden it was, okay, Zeman acknowledged. And I think that taught me a lesson for the whole of my career, that as a leader, don't be afraid to think of what others tell you, and then give a real response, and sometimes acknowledge that, oops, I didn't think of that, or wow, that's a new angle. Then from the Coca-Cola company, all of a sudden, it was a very different industry that approached me. And it was Western Union International Financial Services.
Okay, we've gone spirits, we've gone L'Oreal,
cosmetics, food and beverage,
industry,
drinks. And all of a sudden,
Union.
I had an amazing future Scottish boss and later on an amazing Italian boss. And ultimately, I asked him in the final interview, why are you even considering hiring me? I don't have any experience in the finance industry. And so that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone who understands behavior. Western Union at that time was growing triple, quadruple digits in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East. biggest competitor at that time hardly exists anymore, MoneyGram. Western Union and MoneyGram, they were head-to-head in some markets. MoneyGram was ahead. But the business is growing, and he said, we are growing, but we have no clue why. And that's where you come in with your understanding of behavior patterns and what it means for the business. Once we understand it, we can even grow faster and better. And then I got the job initially for being responsible for marketing for Central Eastern Europe. I arrived in the office, and on the second day he called me. Day 2, what have I done?
Yeah.
Is it just all of a sudden, thank you, bye-bye. And now we are going back to my college years in Hungary. Out of curiosity, I studied Arabic. I was fascinated, especially I love calligraphy or Spencerian script. I am still using a fountain pen. I cannot. Education, we couldn't use anything but fountain pens in Hungary as you were growing up. Why? Because your penmanship becomes beautiful. When you are using a fountain pen, it's easy to smear. So, and the Arab writing is the other way. So your right hand, if you're right-handed, could smear.
Oh, yes.
So you need to be very careful. But he said, you studied Arabic, right? And, yes, sir. Where is this leading? Would you mind moving to Dubai? I was located in Vienna at that time. What about moving to Dubai? So I'm not fired. I was single. All right. Okay, how long does it take for you to pack? And I said, okay, tomorrow? Sir, I just moved. Actually, I didn't, because I was still in Vienna, and I just moved from Vienna to Vienna, from Coca-Cola to Western Union. I said, sir, yes. Okay. Your boss is going to be this Italian gentleman. So he's already there. You will be the second. You just need to build the whole team and help him to make the business successful. So all of a sudden, from Central Eastern Europe, I was responsible for Southeast Asia and the Middle East. And I arrived, and Gustavo Gallucci, an amazing, very mature gentleman, later on he considered me to be his son. The son I think always wanted. He had 3 daughters. Wow. And he said, you speak Arabic? And I said, a little bit. Okay, we need to get the phone lines, we need to get this, we need to get that. And it was, again, we are talking about 2000, so it was a boom period in Dubai. So you had this new amazing building complex with all attracting international businesses. So our office was completely empty, and there was one office taking care of everything. So off you go. And that was another cultural immersion for me. There are quite some similarities between how you deal with the culture in the Middle Eastern world and in Dubai than you deal with Japan. At that time, lots of paperwork. And the little Arabic that I spoke already broke that barrier. I never needed to be fluent, just enough them to recognize he's making the effort. So tick.
I guess that's an interesting point, isn't it? How many Westerners have an interest in Arabic? How many Westerners do any study? Like they go to Dubai today, they probably just use English the whole time, never bother.
Correct. Yes.
So I'm guessing from the opposite side of the table, here's a foreigner, Hungarian, speaks French, speaks English, speaks obviously Hungarian, probably Russian as well. I don't know. Throw Russian in there.
Compulsory.
Yeah, compulsory, right? But he also is, studying Arabic. He has an interest in our culture. I can imagine that would have really resonated.
Yes. Yeah, true.
And a little bit like when, if you studied Japanese before you got here. In my case, I didn't. I started from when I was here. But I know people who've had studied it, and this is going back, I came here first time 79, and no one expected you to speak Japanese then. But over the time, people started to arrive who already had good Japanese, and they were recognized, so I can imagine that result. Yeah.
Yes. And also, I think it goes back to my upbringing, because my father was a doctor, and being a doctor is exploration of everything and anything all the time. He was a lung specialist. My mom was a teacher of Hungarian and literature and history, and we had an amazing home library. Of course, my parents were incredibly busy, and whenever I had a question, the typical kid growing up, why? And my dad didn't have time. My mom didn't have time.
Yes, there's a library.
And it was, my father was amazing. He said, you know what, go there, read that book, and you'll find the answer. And I was the boy who went there and read that.
Yeah, well done.
And that's how I think my horizon opened up. So arrived in Middle East, built up the office, and then the same challenge. So understand where the money comes from and where the money goes. Lots of people working in Egypt, coming from Egypt, India, Lebanon,
Philippines.
Well. So not a lot these days. It's different. But yes, the Philippines. And they were working very hard and sending money. And the initial thinking was, oh, they are sending money back to their home. And then we started tracking. I said, let's map it out, where the money goes, where the money comes from.
Follow the money.
Yes, and follow the money. Yes, amazing expression, thank you. So follow the money. We found out that the Indian community, for example, was sending a lot of money to Germany and the UK. And we were, what the hell is going on here? And it turned out that they are sending money for their kids, their sons and daughters to study, to make them kind of have a better future than they do, working in construction, in restaurants, housemaids, butlers, whatever you will. That humbled me a lot, and that was the learning experience of just listen, observe, watch. And one breakthrough, a little story about how we managed to battle it out with MoneyGram. I had the pleasure of traveling almost all across India, watching the Western Union agents, how they work. And then two realizations: the form that you need to fill in was incredibly difficult and was not available. It was English, Spanish, nothing in Hindi or remotely Indian. So that was one observation which we quickly corrected. And the second observation was that in front of banks, all the agents, the small exchange booths, major banks, the post office, which is the most trusted organization in the world, by the way, there were people sitting outside with a little pad and a pen. And I said, okay, let me just stand here for a while. And then you saw people coming and queuing up. And this gentleman was filling in the forms.
Because they couldn't write.
They couldn't read, couldn't write, but they wanted to send the money from wherever they were. And that led us to create 2000, create the first card for people who sent money with Western Union, and you can pre-program 5 addresses,
right?
Which we offered free help, no writing. They just need to say, okay, Greg was number 1, Mom was number 2, sister was number 3. So they just need to remember the number and give it to, okay, I am going to send money to Greg. Number 2, please, or number 1, whichever. And MoneyGram didn't know what the hell is happening. Because all of a sudden, a lot of people started to get
people say, forget MoneyGram and all the forms.
And the other thing was, what is the best thing what is this thing that we miss most when we are out of our home country? I went through that many times in my life, is sharing the news, connecting with whoever you want to connect to. No internet at that time. Or just about
social
the sound.
Media, nothing, right?
Social media, non-existent. So it was phone. You need to phone home. And for these communities working, it was incredibly expensive.
I remember phoning Australia in those days.
Yes. So the promotion was, okay, you send money with Western Union, you will get a phone card.
Oh, free.
Yeah, with a limited amount on the card.
Like a starter amount.
A starter pack which would allow, I don't remember how many calls. Yes.
Wow, that's pretty smart. Did you come up with that idea?
Yes, because it was so daughter is in the UK, you are in Dubai. Writing a letter, again, can't write. It's the speaking and hearing the voice, which was so important. So yes, that was one of the things that I just thought this would make a difference, and it did.
It certainly would have.
And then
listening to this, I'm thinking to myself, how come Bela didn't wind up running Western Union with all this incredible insight, observation, innovation, great marketing. Like, you, obviously at some point you left, but it sounds like you're just like a superstar in that organization from what I'm hearing. So what made you choose to leave?
My boss retired.
Mm-hmm.
That was, people often say you do not really follow organizations.
Yeah.
I like to be loyal,
Mm-hmm.
but he was an incredibly charismatic leader. And the person
What
who
made him charismatic? I mean, a lot of people listening to this are interested in leading in Japan, but they're interested in leadership, right? And we talk about charismatic leadership. We throw these words around, right? But what was about him that made him charismatic? What was he doing that made him like that?
An incredible passion that he had for anything he was doing, including his family. An amazing skill to listen to up to a point, where he was amazing in making you comfortable. At the same time, he was really into understanding why you want to do what you want to do. He didn't reject any ideas, but he wanted to understand why. Where does it come from? What is it going to do for us? And most importantly, he was the first, really, Coca-Cola is very good at looking at what the consumer is doing. I don't really like that word, but that's the word that we use. But sometimes in the internal world, the distribution systems, later in my career, I haven't used the expression, unfortunately, the consumer left the room. You are a master presenter. I needed to present a lot in the Coca-Cola company. And you prepare an amazing presentation. You are into page 1. And immediately the finance director says, so what is it going to cost us? And the whole discussion, you prepared all the insights, everything that would make sense. But all of a sudden, you are shot down.
On the money.
And it's all about the money. And that also led me to...
On the money on the expenditure side, not necessarily money on the revenue side from what these ideas will generate, right?
Correct.
So very short-term thinking, yeah.
Correct. So passion, understanding, listening, and through the questions, leading you to maybe it's not that good an idea. And you came to that realization. He was not telling you.
Self-discovery, Socratic method, basically, through questioning skills.
Absolutely.
Getting to
and
that point,
at the same time, he was very Italian. So the passion came through in the body language. And that also leads me to later on, probably discussion point of what is the difference. Is you need to, I think, be able to read the body language as well when you are in a business environment.
So after Western Union, where did you go?
I moved to Singapore. At that time, I set up my own little consultancy. Actually, you asked me...
Singapore? I mean, you could have gone back to Europe. You could have gone anywhere, I guess, to have a consultant. Stayed in Dubai. I mean, why Singapore?
During my travels, I was lucky enough to be in Singapore, part of Western Union, and I just like the multicultural environment. You know, Singapore is an amazing melting pot of the Indian culture, the local Singaporeans, Chinese origin sometimes.
Also Malay.
The Malay. It's an amazing world. And it's 22 times 43 kilometers. And when I arrived, I got easily lost there. I was driving and people said, don't worry, just drive around and you get back to where you started in half an hour. I was, I think, besotted with the whole environment and what Singapore was doing at that time. And also, I also believe in whenever you leave a company or an environment, don't leave the connections and the network you build. Continue communicating with them, following what they are doing.
So how did you pivot from running your own business in Singapore to Japan? Because as I recall, that's the next step, right?
That's the next step. And another career pivot. Again, out of the blue, I got an approach by a recruiter saying, we have an interesting opportunity. He didn't tell me all the details at that time. They have been looking for 9 months and they can't find the person. Can I send you the job description? So certainly. It read amazingly appealing to me. And I said, yeah, I am in. Okay. Shared the CV and I got a call from him. They want to see you and they want to talk to you. So, fine. So we're in Singapore and I can be there in half an hour. Actually, it's Tokyo. Still didn't know which company.
Oh, wow. Okay. Keep it a secret.
That was, but later on I learned from him and I'm in touch with him to this very day, that they didn't want to reveal because they really, again, the same happened to me that happened to Western Union. They were just looking for someone who could do what they wanted to do. And whatever needs to be learned, because they looked at my CV, so I already managed to transition from one industry to another. So Tokyo address.
So you arrived in Japan not
knowing which company.
Wow, that's very spooky. It's almost,
well, it's spooky, and also it was difficult because the only thing I knew at that time was it's technology related.
Right.
It's okay. I did all the research I could do because I like to be prepared about the company and the history. And,
you don't even know who the company is, so how do you prepare
exactly.
for that?
So
anyway.
Here's the address. I arrived, and then 5th floor, and I walked into the Nokia Japan office, and it was like, oh, holy cow! Now, I had a Nokia phone.
Well, everyone had a Nokia phone.
At that time, everyone had. We talk about 2005.
Well, Motorola phone, perhaps, if you didn't have a Nokia. Yeah.
Yes. And I went through all the interviews. The last one with the CEO, an amazing Finnish gentleman, Mr. Heikki. And there is a cultural connection between Finnish and Hungarian because some people, the linguists prove that there is our languages come from the same Finno-Ugric origin.
Oh, really? Okay.
And in fact, Hungarian is remotely related to Korean and Japanese.
Wow.
Because the tribes living behind the Ural Mountains, some of them left towards the west, some of them left towards the east. Going to the east, they landed in Korea and Japan.
Okay.
Going to the west, Finland and Hungary. And there is a saying at that time, or a rumor about Hungarians, that we were going in the same direction. And when we arrived at current Finland, there was a sign. It's quiet, peaceful, dark for half a year, but no major incidents. Downwards from Finland, there was a sign showing blood, tears, suffering, wars, sometimes up, sometimes down. Hungarians couldn't read, the Finnish could. So we took immediately a left turn, landed up in Hungary, had all that stuff that people know about the history of Central Eastern Europe. The Finnish were just, thank you. We just enjoy our life here. The happiest country in the world. But that's just a kind of a rumor that Hungarians couldn't read at that time. But when linguists trace the origin of languages back to root words. And you find some root words which are very similar in the two languages.
That's interesting, yeah.
That's very interesting.
You turn up in the Nokia office in Tokyo.
In Tokyo,
right?
Yes.
Finnish company, you're in Tokyo.
Yes.
You've never...
Finnish Japanese. It's very multicultural.
And the job was to be the head of marketing? Is that
head of marketing and sales.
So obviously you took it. And
I was offered.
Yeah, and you accepted, right? And you turn up in Japan.
Yes.
You've had, as you say, an amazing career of moving around both industries, countries, cultures, languages. I mean, it's quite remarkable what you've done. So when you got into Japan that first time, was there a marketing team in place that you took over, or did they ask you to build it, or how did that work?
There were 3 marketing people there, and I needed to build up the team. There was hardly...
So here comes this Hungarian guy. Who's never been in our industry, tech industry, and he's going to tell us how to do marketing in Japan. So I can imagine from their point of view, be like, really? So that must have been a bit of a difficult first couple of conversations. How did you deal with that?
The same I dealt with all the other jobs I had. It was let's quickly understand what the market wants, because Nokia missed that. In Japan, they missed that. And it was very interesting because the Japanese market, even to this very day, is incredibly technology advanced. The Nokia main research and development center was in Japan. The reason why Nokia put the development center here was because Japan was so far ahead of everything else. So some of the major Nokia breakthrough mobile units and mobile phones were developed here in Japan.
Really? Okay.
But that development center hardly did any job for Japan itself. Because, it's the diminishing returns. Investing into Japan, it can be very high, especially when you talk about the mobile phone industry. Whereas in Europe or in Middle East, in the United States, it's much, the barriers are much lower. The standards are the same. In Japan, for Docomo, at that time they were even called Vodafone, the competitor. Two different systems, two different developments. And I was not only responsible for the mobile phone sector, but also the business-to-business part of Nokia, which not a lot of people know about. It's all the equipment that you have to enable mobile communication. So all the relay stations, the transmitters, and to this very day, Nokia is the market leader in Japan. And in many other parts of the world. People think of Nokia as a mobile phone, but what you need to make it work is all the other.
As a side note, when I was working in Austrade, I pioneered the import of those relay towers, which are made out of steel. And of course, they have to be constructed extremely well because of high winds, typhoons and that type of thing, earthquakes and whatever. And that was the first time that there'd ever been any foreign towers brought into Japan, and that was something I did when I was in Nagoya. So I got a little bit of touch with that part of the tech industry, working with some American joint ventures here to do that. So side note there, just
it's an amazing thing, and that brings me to the point of really. The moment you step into any new environment, my approach is learn as much as you can. But
in terms of learning much as you can, okay, so you've got 3 people in the team, and let's get to the understanding. But how did you convince them to follow you? Because again, okay, you turn up, you've been parachuted in, you're not Japanese, you don't speak Japanese, may have some linguistic connections. A millennia ago, but you don't speak Japanese. You don't think about the Japanese market. Why should we listen to anything you say? Why should we take direction from you? And how did you go around that type of? I'm sure the Japanese never said anything, but I bet they were thinking that. To win them over, what did you think about how I'm going to win these guys over to? Okay, let's explore this or let's do that, because I'm sure they were already doing something themselves. And they're probably quite happy with that. And so why are you doing anything different? So how did you convince them?
I don't really use the word convince them. It's more like let them get to know you, and also let them express themselves. And at the same time, as you said, I was parachuted in at a rather high position. Be humble to say, I'm sorry, I have no idea about this industry. I can bring, and I don't even say I can bring a lot in other areas, but I think I complement what you already are doing. But first, can you teach me? Can you tell me? Can you tell me more about the Nokia history? And as you said, the initial reaction of the team to me being announced, all of a sudden I haven't met them, they haven't met me. And then it was this guy saying, okay, so tell me more about Nokia. And that actually, in some ways, later on I realized humbled them. Because
why is that?
because they didn't know enough about Nokia's history.
Themselves.
Really?
Oh,
and that was another key learning that I now carry on to everything I do. And probably it was in me before, but Nokia brought it out to say, all right, Greg, so
define the box.
Define the box. Tell me about this and that.
It's exactly define the box.
And then, again, I was still single, enjoying my life. Side note.
So what year are we talking about now?
We are talking about how the
what
team...
Year? What year are we?
We are talking about 2005 onwards to 2010.
Right, okay.
Typical, initially I stay long and late in the office because I needed to absorb so much. I needed to understand, talking to all the other functions, which is a very, very important element. And then I go back to my desk, open office environment, and there are my team members making notes and learning about Nokia history. Themselves, because that was the missing. So the next meeting I had with them, and I did the same. And they started, Nokia was founded in 1860. Oh, that's interesting. Coca was founded around the same time, actually 1 year apart. And all of a sudden so you work for the Coca-Cola company. And you just start the conversation, not related to anything that you were doing. I mean, they were doing here, I was doing there. It was the same that you asked me at the very beginning. So how did you get to Japan? And the other key was, should they invest into knowing me and building that relationship, or am I the typical other expats who will be there for 2 years or 3 years? So I couldn't be bothered to build the relationship because Greg will be gone in a year, Bela will be gone in 2 years. And that was almost the first question they asked. So, Bela-san, how long are you going to stay in Japan? I said, a long time, I believe. I love this. I really enjoy what I'm doing. And I was also open to accepting a local package. So I told them, look, I am not an expat. And that somehow made a huge difference. The other huge difference, and ever since I landed in Japan, that follows me everywhere I go. Usual questions, so Bela, Schweiger, so where are you from? And I say Hungary. And all of a sudden you hear the clocks in their brains. And Hungary. Someone please help me. Where the hell is Hungary? And later on I realized that is actually an advantage for me, because the moment you say you are from Australia, you are from the US, from Germany, France, I can go down the list, Italian. Japanese will already have a preconceived idea of, Australian, he's going to behave like this. But Hungarians, in many cases, I am the first one they ever meet or probably will ever meet.
That's probably true. Actually, I don't meet many Hungarians in Japan. I mean, I've been here nearly 40 years altogether. And I think back, and I meet a lot of people.
Right.
How many Hungarians have I met in that time? In Japan, it's a very small number.
Yes. According to the embassy, we are about a community of less than 1,000 in Japan.
1,000, under 1,000. My God! No wonder I'm not meeting many of them.
Yeah, because most of the Hungarians usually work in IT manufacturing.
Right.
And quite a few of my Hungarian friends here, they work for the Toyotas of this world.
Right.
The automotive industry,
right.
Docomo, and they are not always. Most of them are not stationed in Tokyo.
Right.
And quite a few Hungarians are in academia at different universities.
Right.
But that for me was also they wanted to learn more. So that was, again, I want to learn more about Japan and all the cultural references and everything that you are taught to do as a leader arriving. And they started to ask, and I was encouraging, ask me as many questions as you wish.
And so that's working well, and then you make
Yes.
the move to Haagen Dazs. So
Yes.
what made you make the move, and how is it again? This time you come into Haagen Dazs as a person who knows about Japan
Yes.
by that time, and
Yes.
you probably speak the language by that time, I'm sure. So what made you move, and how was that initial transition?
What made me move was the iPhone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The iPhone was launched in 2008, and by 2009 it was a runaway success. And very quickly they demolished Nokia all over the world. Japan being no exception. And as I said, building a brand in Japan for Nokia was not a priority. And at that time Nokia was really, I think, not thinking of what the future of Nokia could be. And they cut everything left, right, and center. And all of a sudden, our boss called us in and said, we have 8 months to close everything.
Gee.
And this is where my network comes in. I was offered a role in Finland, in Espoo, where Nokia's headquarters were at that time. And honestly, I was so comfortable. I was so comfortable here that I didn't feel like going back to Europe at that time. So I said, okay, let me think about it. And at the same time, FCC, you mentioned FCC.
Yeah. Which is the Foreign Corporate Communications Organization,
which is kind of restarting now. And that's where I met a gentleman who was in my role before at Haagen Dazs.
I have to mention, just so our viewers won't appreciate this, but you were wearing a sort of Prussian school uniform, Japan school uniform, high collar.
Yes.
And a coat that sort of went down about the knees, this long black coat. It was the most amazing looking outfit. I remember this.
Yes.
And I've never seen anyone decked out like this before. It was very striking. I was like, wow, who's this guy? You know? It was a very spectacular entry, I have to say. And, unforgettable. I still remember. I can see that vision in my mind still. You know?
And you know that was actually inspired by the Matrix movie?
Was it? Okay.
Yes,
actually, that's a movie I'm yet to see. I haven't even seen it.
Well, the key protagonist is wearing that coat, Neo, who is Keanu Reeves.
Okay.
And Nokia was in the first Matrix movie.
Was it? Okay. I've never seen any of those movies.
And the amazing story about that, how you build a brand and how you create a brand. Later on, when I was teaching at Temple University, I asked my students, so there are 3 Matrix movies. How many movies were Nokia in? Almost without an exception, students say all 3. And I said, okay, that's interesting. Actually, Nokia was only in the first one. Wow. The other 2 was Samsung. And how you build a brand, how you create that impression. The first one, everyone remembers the first one. And that was Nokia. So immediately that link. And the same happens with the Olympics, with the 2 major credit cards. People walk out of the Olympics and you ask them, so which credit card company sponsors the Olympics? An amazing statistic, almost half the people say it's MasterCard, whereas it's Visa.
Right.
So imagine you are paying millions of dollars. Actually, Coca-Cola was paying for the rights about, I can't tell you the exact figure, but it's a high figure in the dollar range for that sponsorship. So imagine you're paying all that money, all that signage across the stadium. Everywhere you go, it's Visa, 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 and you come out and I ask you, so who sponsors it? It's because the image is different and so strong. So what brings me to Haagen Dazs? I met him over lunch, Chris Armacost. You may have met him as well.
Chris Armacost, name rings a bell. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, because it was 2009 when we started talking about it. And he said, he was an expert, and he said, I want to go back. I have 2 daughters, and one is going to university, the other one is high school, and I don't want them to go in Japan. I want to go back, and I'm looking for my replacement. And I said, oh, Chris said, that's interesting. I would be interested. And he said, send me your CV. So no recruiters, nothing. And 2 weeks later, he said, the HR would like to talk to you. And then it's another meandering story of, okay, can you fly to Korea? Yeah, sure. Why? Because I think your future boss, if, is in Korea. So I went to Korea. I met my future boss there. And he said, by the way, our international VP is here. I think you should meet him. So imagine this is your second or third interview. And all of a sudden you are meeting the VP, an amazing, again, another amazing inspirational gentleman. And halfway through our it was not an interview, it was more of a chat. And he said, the CEO of General Mills is here. I think you should meet him. Really? And he has only a few minutes, but why don't you meet Mr. Powell, Mr. Ken Powell? And yes, of course, no problem at all. So in walks, and amazingly, you know, the Minnesota Nice, or Minneapolis Nice as they call it, you wouldn't tell that he is the CEO of one of the largest FMCG companies.
And General Mills is a huge client of Dale Carnegie too, I have to tell you.
Yes.
In Minnesota.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, huge
I didn't
client.
know that.
Yeah.
So he sits down and said, okay, so remind me, what position are we recruiting you for? And I said, okay, this is the Haagen Dazs joint venture / the General Mills country manager or general manager, call it whatever you want, role. Oh, okay. So what about Japan? Why? And then I dared to ask the question of him, so what do you think about Japan yourself? And it was an immediate response. I am so much in love with Japan. And all of a sudden, the discussion was not anymore about what you did, walk me through your CV. It was about, so tell me about Japan. And I know now I know that you are coming from a different industry, but I understand you have FMCG under your belt. Do you know Haagen Dazs? And I said, of course, we are. Let me come to that a little later. We keep an eye on a lot of things. I keep an eye on a lot of things that's happening. So of course, you know, Haagen Dazs is legendary. And said, okay, bye. And then I got the job.
This is amazing. You go for a simple interview. Why not make the global
And
CEO?
I was like, because I did not realize, I didn't know that for General Mills, the Haagen Dazs brand at that time was about $1 billion in sales value. And half of that was Japan.
Wow.
And to this very day, Japan is the largest market for Haagen Dazs in the world.
Wow.
China started to catch up when I was there, but they could never really catch up.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Leading is easy. Getting people to follow is the hard part. That is a great quote from Yogi Berra. Surprisingly, despite the complexities of leading here in Japan, everyone has to work it out by themselves. Foreign leaders want practical, applicable, expert advice. This is now available for the first time in history. Grab your copy of Japan Leadership Mastery on Amazon today and avoid the mystery, trial and error, especially the errors. And the thing I remember about Haagen Dazs is that it sounds Scandinavian, but actually it's got nothing to do with Scandinavia at all. They created it in New York, I think, is that right? Yeah,
that's correct.
Created the name
to
give it a sort of illusion of some sort of European idea, which is sort of ironic, isn't it, in a way?
1961, Ruben Mattes created the Haagen Dazs brand. And as the folklore story goes, he was sitting in his kitchen looking at and going through a dictionary and finding words for the brand itself. And while he was sitting in the kitchen, because he believed that you need to create an ice cream that can be made in a normal kitchen. Nothing artificial, just whatever ingredients you have, and you create that ice cream. And his vision was to create the best ice cream in the world. So he came up with this world of Haagen Dazs. And a lot of people, when it was launched late in 1961, in August actually, so a couple of months from here, people thought exactly what you described. Okay, it's a mysterious name, we don't know anything about it, but probably it's coming from somewhere, a Nordic country
or something like
exactly
that, yeah.
Denmark. And he was the most amazing marketeer again. Another inspirational person I have never met, unfortunately. He passed away before. He said, okay, so people think it's Denmark. Let's put the map of Denmark on the packaging. So you see the packages of the Haagen Dazs in the 70s, early 70s, still having the map of Denmark on it. And just as a little side note, there is no umlaut, which is the A with the two dots on the top coming from German. So it's not in the Danish language, and nor is the ZS combination. That's in a lot of Central Eastern European languages. That's in Hungarian, for example. But the mystery to this very day in Japan continues. Not a lot of people know that everything that you eat in Japan is made in Japan.
So here we go. Again, you're parachuted in, the CEO interviews you, gives you the job. Hi, here's your new boss for Haagen Dazs, existing business. You know, half of the global results are coming out of Japan. That's a huge responsibility for a start.
Yes.
Oh, welcome aboard. By the way, you're responsible for half of our revenue, Bela.
And a significant portion of the profit, which Haagen Dazs at that time was the two joint venture revenues reported was one of Haagen Dazs. Wow. The other one was Yoplait.
Wow.
So
yeah,
I was on that line.
Right.
Yes, it was.
So again, how do you bridge into getting a team, existing team, to follow you? Now this time, you're not going in as the head of marketing. You're going in as a CEO.
Yeah.
So that's again a different role.
A very different role.
Different set of responsibilities. How did you get people to follow you?
Let me backtrack a little bit. So when I was recruited, I did not know that Haagen Dazs is a joint venture. And then it was so your title is VP of Haagen Dazs Japan, but actually you need to lead the company. The reason being is that General Mills has 50% of the joint venture. 40% is Suntory. And historically, the president is nominated from Suntory. And 10% is Takanashi Dairies, which is a premium local dairy brand. And he's running the factory as well. So, as you said, it's an amazing responsibility. And I asked my boss, who was head of international, Chris O'Leary, so what do you expect of me? Haagen Dazs was doing okay. Never, after the initial years, it has always been profitable. And he said, we are not growing. Actually, we are gradually losing. So I have a one-sentence mission for you. Just turn the business around. All right, okay. Sure. I was a self-confident a-hole. I can do this easily. Not so fast, young man. When you are in an office of full Japanese, 210 in the office and 250 people in the factory.
And they're coming from the joint venture partners as well, right?
Yes,
so the
Suntory.
Staff is full of Suntory people, okay?
Yes.
Right?
The president.
Who know they'll probably go back to Suntory at some stage. They're going to rotate in and out. So,
absolutely.
You know, interesting that you're here, Bela. I'll be here myself a couple of years, and I'll go back to Suntory, where my future lies.
Yes.
And so, thank you. Your idea is very interesting, but not that interesting. So, how again, running a joint venture in Japan by itself, that's extremely difficult. Huge market share.
Yes.
Huge profitability. Again, degrees of difficulty. So, how did you make it work?
First of all, pay your respect to the other side. My very first visit was to Suntory. And I had the fortune to meet Saji-san, who is a fourth generation kind of side descendant.
Is this the very tall gentleman, Saji-san? Extremely tall from Japanese, right?
Yes,
yeah, he's actually same size. He's in my Rotary Club.
Yes.
Yeah, I know him from my Rotary Club.
Yeah, he's a multi-billionaire. But you never know. The whole Saji family, the whole Suntory family, or actually the Tori family, is you never know. We had the public part now with Jim Beam is kind of
in
there.
fact, ironically, he lives probably, I'll say 400, 500 meters from where I live in. I'm in Shirogane Dai, and he's in Takanawa Dai, very, very close. And sometimes I see him walking when I'm out walking in the morning. So, yeah, interesting. So, how did that? Because he speaks very good English too.
Yes, he does, but he doesn't
speak English to me. But he
never. He actually. He graduated in New York. He was in the U.S. and that's the story of Haagen Dazs actually. Because his wife was with him, and his wife loved it so much that he contacted at that time.
Is that how they came to buy it? Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
He contacted the name escapes me. It was before General Mills bought the company. But he actually contacted the owner of the Haagen Dazs brand and said, we want to launch it in Japan. And they sent the team here because the only way it could have happened was local manufacturing at one point. And the Haagen Dazs technical experts from General Mills It Will Come to Me, which was the name of the other company, they went to meet Takanashi-san in Hokkaido. They had a relatively small factory in another place that I'm not going to tell about. Still secret.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, not a lot of people.
Well,
not a lot of people know because on the packaging it's the Maguro GT Tower office address, not the factory address. So they looked at the Takanashi factory and they said, yeah, they are not there where they should be, but the passion is there. And I think at that time it was a huge bet which paid out amazingly. Now, not a lot of joint ventures survive. This year is the 40th anniversary of Haagen Dazs in Japan. It was launched in 1984.
Did you go through a sort of another interview with Saji-san in terms of, you're the new guy, but actually we own 40% of this, so we're pretty interested in who you are.
Yes, absolutely. And he did that. He did it again in a very friendly, which I didn't expect. I was told that these people are untouchable, and no, he told me the story of why Haagen Dazs and where it came from, why in Japan, and it was a very pleasant experience. And then, it's a small world, and of course that's I think what makes a joint venture work so well. The very next day, my boss in Minneapolis, Chris O'Leary, called me that we just had a message from Saji-san that you're okay. And that was his style. He was not going overboard, but, getting that you're okay meant that, wow, it was great. And you asked me how I managed to not win, but get the team engaged was the second or third day I asked them, I want to go to the factory.
The secret factory?
Yes. And then they were like, why? And then slowly they started to understand that the way I approached all the jobs that I had was learn. What is it? Where is it coming from? How are we making it? Why? Because I think business leaders are or need to be very strong in the marketing area, and very often they are labeled, he's a good marketeer, not necessarily as a good business person.
Right.
How can you move from the marketing to the business is when you have the holistic view of all the functions, and then you can engage them in discussions related to marketing at a very different level. So they started to gradually understand, because being the small boy that I wanted to be all the time, that 6, 7, 8-year-old. My boy is just about to turn 8. Is this why? Why? Tell me, explain it to me. And they were just really, okay, so he really is into it. And the exact same thing happened as what happened in Haagen Dazs with a much bigger team. The whole of the business office in Haagen Dazs, the 210 people, and later on the factory. So tell me about the history of Haagen Dazs. And by that time, the team didn't know a lot of the history.
I guess if it's been here for such a long time, it's sort of like a given, you don't, you just join a company which has a business. You're not really thinking back to the roots and who is involved. Like in our case, we're sitting here in the Whitlow room today, and across there we've got a major international, I won't say the name, major national company being trained in the Mochizuki room. Because the two people who brought Dale Carnegie to Japan are Mr. Whitlow and Mr. Mochizuki. So again, and we published a book on the history. It's actually also on Wikipedia, the history of Dale Carnegie in Japan. Like you, I want to know the history. And when, in my case, I thought, well, that would be easier. Just talk to New York. Send me the history about Dale Carnegie in Japan. We don't have anything. Like, what? A lot of people don't have an interest. And I actually had to go and it took me about 5 years of research to actually piece it all together and find the actual real history.
Right.
But I wanted to know, and I want the people here to know.
Yes.
I'm very similar to you in that sense.
Yes.
I think you've got to understand where you're coming from, what's the core,
Absolutely.
and then you can build on top of that. So yeah, I agree with that idea.
And when I joined, it was still, around 30 years in Japan. Joint venture always had someone from outside as in my role. But I was the first one telling the team that we are going to Minneapolis together. And it was like, for some, their first international trip. We had a team of 12 people from different functions.
This
not
is
just
the leadership
marketing.
team you're talking about?
No, not only.
Who are we talking? What's this team then? Which team?
The team from the Haagen Dazs, from the factory to the marketing team, the finance team, the whole contingent.
All right.
All across the function, including the president. We went to Minneapolis, talked to there are 3 R&D centers for Haagen Dazs in the world. One is in Minneapolis, one is in Japan, and one is in South America. Europe. At that time, we were building up one in South America. Understanding what's happening and building that face-to-face relationship, because they needed to understand. In the Japanese, the Haagen Dazs team were coming up with lots of ideas, and we needed to really turn the brand around, refresh the brand. And I told them, look, I am the approver here in Japan, but the ultimate approval is in Minneapolis, especially when it comes to new formulations. You need to know these people. You need to be able to pick up the phone and talk to them without me. And that was another breakthrough, I believe, in that culture, that they felt that there is that person sitting in that office, which actually I believe in an open door office approach, to the extent that for the first 2 years, I asked the door to be removed. Because you can say I have an open office policy, but the only thing I had...
So knock on the door though.
The only thing I had was, the museum cordons, the 2 little poles with the tape. I had that one. So when I said, please, conference call or like that, I just put, and so no entry.
No entry for a minute.
But, it was up there for about 2 years. And you need to do what you are saying. So, but the fact that they were okay, and I was okay, that they pick up the phone or send an email directly to the Minneapolis team, the other development team, for example, in Arras, in France. So finally, okay, but just keep me informed. So when I got a call from whoever international, don't forget that I need to represent you as well.
You need to keep me in
yes,
touch with
exactly.
what's
And I'm discuss, no problem. And that was for them a new experience as well.
And also, I think, it's probably the same everywhere, but I think even more so in Japan, meeting someone, creating some degree of personal connection makes contact much easier. When the person's unknown, there's a bit of that envy, caution. Oh, I'm not quite sure how this is going to go, what I can tell them, what I can't tell them, how can I trust them, blah, blah, blah. But taking them there, getting to meet people, I think that probably for them made a huge difference in terms of their comfort to reach out if they wanted to email or talk or whatever.
And you asked me how I managed to get the team on board. The other one was Japanese companies and international companies. I think it happens everywhere. They are in silos.
Yeah.
The different functions. Yeah. And to the extent that in Haagen Dazs, the sales team was on a different floor.
This is in Japan, you mean?
In Japan. Okay. The Japan office, again, GT Tower. So 2 floors. Sales team, marketing team, hardly talk to each other.
Traditional enemies, as I recall, in most places.
Yeah, in most places. And then 2 things. First was I called my boss in Minneapolis and said, I want to rearrange the office. Are you okay with that? And I only come for the board meeting, so
go for it.
You are there. Go ahead. So I talked to the president, and he talked to Suntory, and we said, okay, complete refurbishment of the office, which was part of the message of we are relaunching the brand. Bring the 2 teams together on the same floor. All of a sudden, communication was at a very different level, and brought in a new function, which was the trade marketing function.
The what function?
Trade marketing. So there was a person pulling the 2 things together. Okay. He had that experience in Suntory. So he was sent from Suntory, and he did a fantastic job of bridging the 2. So the dynamics started to change, and also I started to kicking people out of the office, not firing them, of course. Sometimes coming with me, and sometimes I said, you cannot understand what's happening in the market sitting in the office. The sales team, of course, they are out there all the time. The marketing team, not so much. They were happy making their PowerPoint presentations and the amazing Excel sheets, which I usually call the war of the ants in the presentations, because you can't see anything. But they come with Excel sheets. And I said, okay, just let's time out. Come with me, or at one point I even mandated that half the day you need to be out in the market. And then they came back with, our competitor is doing this and that. From the Akagis to the Morinagas of this world. Lady Borden, which was the key competitor at that time, hardly exists anymore. And they came back with all these insights about, the competitors are doing that, and said, okay, but we are the leader. It's nice to get some inspiration, but did you look at other categories? Bela, what do you mean? Did you look at candies, sweets, chips, flavors, new things? What's happening? Silence.
Just looked at ice creams.
And then went back, and at the same time, I also believe, and that brings me to a point that I think for anyone working in Japan and coming to Japan may find valuable. I think Japan is probably the most data-rich company in any market that I worked in. Whatever you want to know, there's an association for that. There is, and companies are pretty okay to share the data with these associations as long as it's anonymous. There is an ice cream association. There is a vending machine association. You are doing martial arts. You have an association. So you have so much data at your fingertip. And I said, we need to understand, because at that time when I joined, the core user was aging. and we wanted to be very, very appealing to the younger generation who completely forget about Haagen Dazs. And it was a luxury that they can't afford. So let's understand that. And there's another fascinating source, which is the habit study done by Hakuhodo. And it's the most representative study that you can get. And they do it every year. So, and you can go to them and say, I want to understand this market segment. And they have that width and length and depth to do that. And in fact, I'm quietly crediting myself to push them to extend the range, because we wanted to understand the older generation as well. And at that time, almost all research was cut off at 59.
Oh, interesting.
And I pushed them to go to 69.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was only me, but I wanted to know what's happening with that market segment.
But you know, I mean, when I was growing up in Australia, someone who's in their 50s looked old.
Yes.
In Australia, they were burnt by the sun, they were hard work, they were burnt out. You know, 70-year-olds, you didn't meet, when I was growing up, too many, they were dead by Australia. They smoked themselves and drank themselves to death, the guys anyway. Maybe the women survived, but the men are all gone. But, you know, you think about today, 70-year-olds are still working, they're active, they're sharp, they've got, you know, money, don't have time still because they're still busy working. But, you know, it's not like your 70-year-old when you were a kid. It totally changed. So that's interesting. They didn't take it beyond 59. No. That's interesting.
But now you have data there as well. And what was behind this, that we needed to piece the two pieces together. So the secondary information that we could get, everything, and the first impressions that you get from what you observe, what you see on the market. And that led to they talk about the consumer. So I like to name them. I like to bring them to life. So we created the new target that we wanted.
So persona.
Yes, you can call it the consumer persona. So we created her, and it was really nice, written on a page. And I said, what's her name? And again, the team was, okay, that's an interesting one. We always talk about the consumer. No, what's her name? So they went back and came back that we should call her Naoko. And I said, oh, that sounds nice. Why? And by that time, they learned that they need to be able to tell me why. And they said, well, that was the most popular name when she was born. So a lot of her contemporaries, they may be called now. Okay, good, well done. So Naoko was born, and remember earlier when I said the consumer usually leaves the room. And we had these major board meetings 3 times a year when the Haagen Dazs, the General Mills directors came. Again, 5 seats. 1 is Takanashi and 4 Suntory, 5 General Mills. I was the board director, so I needed to do all that stuff. And when Naoko was born, I asked my amazing assistant, and initially she was like, I think Bela-san is either drinking too much or something is wrong with him, because I asked her, can you get a mannequin for me? She said, oh, okay. But she learned that I accept no to a point, but at one point I said, I really want this, so can you? And she found the mannequin, and then I said, can you dress her up? And here is Naoko, and here are the images, and the marketing team did an amazing storyboarding about her. And she said, yeah, you mean buy clothes? And yeah, everything. And here's your budget. So she went off, we dressed her up, and next board meeting, General Mills people arrived, Suntory directors arrived, and a mannequin was in the room. And they were like,
what the hell's this going on here?
Is this, can you call an assistant? And the marketing team said, no, sir, she stays. Naoko-san is in the meeting. Naoko-san?
Yeah.
And then they started to get it, and General Mills, my boss, just he said, I wish I had camera phones, and phones were not in their meeting. I said, I wish I could have taken a picture of the Suntory guys walking in and looking at this, and
what the hell's going on?
Which room? What's going on? What's General Mills up to? But that changed the whole dynamics of the meeting. And the other thing,
because I guess if you think about it, the consumer,
yes,
or the persona,
yes,
is a remote idea when you're sitting in your office every day, working 10, 15 hours a day like the Japanese work, and it's a faction of numbers and stats and trends and consumption and blah blah blah, and it's dehumanized in a way, isn't it, at the business level? So what I'm hearing you're saying is basically you really, in a very physical way, you brought the human element back into the discussion. And so it's not an abstract idea. This is our client here.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that I learned in the Coca-Cola company, I was responsible for innovation and new product development, that as early as possible, let people taste and test. And you would be amazed how the meeting dynamism changes the moment you do that. And the exact same thing happened in board meetings. Then the marketing team and the sales team, because I insisted that they present together, not separate. So it was, this is the concept, this is Naoko-san, this is where Naoko-san shops, and this is sales team. We are going to address Naoko-san in the store this way. Marketing will do this. So the push and pull together. And then it was, okay, it's a new flavor. And then the board members didn't know that at that point on cue, the samples arrived.
Samples turn up. Matcha ice cream or something.
Well, matcha is one, but we had other interesting flavors. No, absolutely.
The Japanese matcha is the idiosyncratic Japanese version of ice cream flavors.
Ice cream, right? Yes. And all of a sudden, these amazingly senior executives and everyone in the room, we were children back in scooping it up and this is okay. Can I make? Of course, everyone can make a comment, and it was an amazing experience because all of a sudden it was not about numbers. It was not about it was that. Excuse me the analogy, it was like we are back in the caves when nothing written. People forgot completely about the PowerPoint. They forgot about the War of the Ends on an Excel sheet. It was about, do you think it's okay? Do you think it's going to...
I think for your team members who are obviously in the room, the mannequin and how that's accepted and the idea, the conceptual part behind that, and then the actual physical tasting and the reaction of that.
Yes.
As the leader, this is something incredibly innovative that no one's ever done before. So your credibility must have gone through the roof after this. And people say, well, he's not that crazy Hungarian we were worried about. He's actually a visionary. He's someone who's innovative. It's acceptable to headquarters, acceptable to our major joint venture partners. There's a lot of interesting insight that he's bringing to the company, a new direction, new launch, fresh energy. So that must have helped you a lot to push things through after that.
Absolutely. It earned me the trust. And the other thing that earned me the biggest trust, I believe, is when we went through the major earthquake.
It's 2011.
2011, and it was, I admire the Japanese mentality of when a major event happens, they don't sit there crying about it and saying, why any of the gods that we worship, why did you do this to us? Japanese are, let's start cleaning up.
Let's get on with it.
Let's get on with it.
Yeah.
And that was also an interesting point in my career to come through as a key influencer on how we should manage this crisis. And I think I was lucky and unlucky in many ways that in Dubai I needed to manage through what happened after 9/11.
Now here's a point. When we had the earthquake, tsunami, triple nuclear meltdown.
Yes.
There was a radioactive cloud.
Yes.
That came across Tokyo and other places.
Yes.
And you couldn't drink the water for X number of days because it was radioactive in the system before it was flushed out, and we were drinking bottled water. And a lot of foreigners left. And this term flygen, as a gaijin, as the foreigner became flygen, they flew, they left.
Yes.
They vacated the country. The certain embassies, including the Australian embassy too, were giving advisories that you should leave the country. And a lot of people did leave the country.
Yeah.
How about you? What did you do?
I needed to manage the business.
You stayed, right?
I stayed. I didn't go anywhere.
Again, and I stayed too. And I did that, my young son here, he was at that time, 2011, he was 10 years of age at that time. We're in Tokyo, radioactive cloud goes over the whole works, but I stayed because I thought to myself, well, okay, I'm capable of taking the family to Australia or somewhere else or, overseas or whatever. But no, I'm staying because I'm the leader.
Yes.
And I want the team to see that I'm your leader, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to go through this together. And again, that sort of credibility is important as a leader, I think.
Yes, you're absolutely right. General Mills, again, my boss immediately called me to say, our regional office is in Hong Kong. Do you want to go there? I said, no. And it was like, are you sure? We are worried. General Mills is a very, very caring company. We are worried about you. If you want to move, first plane out. I said, same as you. Family.
What about the 210 people in my office and the hundreds in the factories? Are we taking all them to Hong Kong too?
And then the end of that discussion was amazing for me because Mr. O'Leary said, I understand it's your call.
Yeah.
And I support that call if you want to make that call to stay.
Yeah.
And we do whatever you need, because of my a huge responsibility at that time. Haagen Dazs was almost $500 million in sales. He said, you know my number? Of course, sir. Whenever you need to call. And then I went into complete action mode. I couldn't think of what's happening or the worries. It was, okay, we need water, we need batteries. Where do we get them? You mentioned water. It's very interesting. You needed to sometimes submit samples to different authorities that everything is okay. And we needed to do that for reasons I can't disclose. And we needed equipment to measure radioactivity. And it was like Minneapolis, because at that time, companies were scrambling to get those pieces of equipment. And we needed to get that equipment. And it was an investment way beyond my authority and even beyond my boss's authority. It was a board meeting decision, whether we invest or not, whether we buy it or not. So imagine while you are juggling all that we need water, and it was sent from Hong Kong. We needed batteries sent from Singapore. And again, it how you build that international network once you're an international company. So I could call and say, I need this, can you? So of course we can. Whatever, Bela, you need, just let us know. And it was Minneapolis, we need this equipment. So they already tentatively placed the order, and I needed to call an emergency board meeting to get the approval for this. And Suntory was like, really? They were dragging their legs, and ultimately my boss said, Bela, this is the point when you have the 50%. We have the decisive decision.
That's interesting, though, because you would think Suntory's beverage, amongst other things, manufacturing, don't they have the same stringent requirements from the Japanese regulatory side to also have measurement of radioactivity for the things that they're putting into their product? I can't understand why they'd be dragging their feet on that.
Well, they were, because I don't know why, but they were. And it's interesting what you just pointed out. The equipment arrived, so approval was given. Actually, I basically, with the backing of my boss, I said, okay, we listen to all parties. General Mills is putting in the 50% for this. We are calling it. And, Suntory was, the directors were a little bit surprised. Never happened. But ultimately said, you know what, at the end, you make big we may ask you to to pay for all. And they actually had that disclaimer. And again, with the backing of my boss. And by that time, I had the trust in Minneapolis as well. I didn't even need to consult him to say, General Mills will cover that if it comes to that. And Takanashi-san was whatever. He was very happy because he was running the factory. He was getting his percent of the joint venture. So whatever happened, he was okay. And by the way, he was in favor of the piece of equipment. Arrived, we started the measuring twice a day. Everything was okay. And this comes to your point of Suntory is having factories all over Japan. And after a couple of weeks, I got a message from Suntory. Could you come? Yes. Suntory office. Bela-san, can we use the equipment? And they started sending samples, and we were doing it for them. And ultimately, everyone was happy. And the other thing that I needed to remember the times when that happened, and advertising were all pulled. Companies were saying we are not advertising. And
well, the other thing too is, remember, the lights weren't turned on.
Yes.
Because there was a power shortage, because the nuclear reactors weren't working and were conserving energy, and it was a gloomy place. The whole, like, the outside, the lights weren't on. The typical Tokyo firmament not on. Companies, we would turn the lights down, so all contributing to save energy. But it was a gloomy time.
Yes.
I remember that. It's like, wow. And then eventually that changed, but for quite a while there, it wasn't a happy place.
No, and it was a tough discussion because almost the whole team again said we need to pull advertising. And some, as you may remember, some of the slots, advertising slots, were the government asked that they take over those slots because they needed to make the announcements. They needed the time. But still, there was time remaining, and most of the companies pulled everything off. And I said, let's continue. Let's continue to, as you said, bring a little positivity into that gloom. And later on, we realized that the most magical thing happened. For a long time, people, all the aftershocks, the tremors in the buildings, she was already...
I'll intervene there. You and I live here.
Yes.
So, we talk about aftershocks, right? If you're living in Australia, which hardly has any, it does have earthquakes, but very, very few, you think an aftershock is just a little bit of a tremble.
Yes.
We're talking about major earthquakes 6-7 times a day, every day, for weeks after that major earthquake. And and you're sitting in your office thinking, oh, is this... particularly in Tokyo, is this the big one?
Yeah, the second.
Is this going to be the one that's going to devastate Tokyo and the whole place is going to burn down? Every time you had a major shake, it may not be a 7, it might be a 5 or a 6. And we talk about an aftershock. It's not a little wobble. No. It's something pretty big.
Yes. Well, you know the area that we both live in, that area. Nakamaguro, GT Tower, sitting in the office. Yes, it was shaking, and it was shaking. It was moving in one or the other direction. So going through that, it was what is, as you said, is the big one coming. Our factory was down only for 4 days. There is something that I can't tell you about, but we were ready if in case something major happens, and still have ice cream on the shelves. And it was this, okay, what's going to happen tomorrow? Why don't I indulge a little? And our sales actually, well, one reason, almost everyone pulled off. They had difficulties with the supply chains. Haagen Dazs didn't. So plus in our favor. Second, it was, okay, I'm okay to spend. At that time, it was about 300 yen, 1 cup, below 300. And it was, I'm going to buy that. So it was that, and then people just kind of reconnected again with Haagen Dazs.
So thinking about, the experiences of leading here in Japan, what advice would you give someone who was being sent to Japan to run the operation here, if you just maybe 3 pieces of advice, what would they be?
Think of first learn everything about your own business and learn everything that you can, and then continue to learn. So for me, it's this continuous learning. The other one is look at how Japanese develop their brands and what they are doing and what you can learn from it, and how you can bring what you want to happen in Japan. I like to describe Japan as the 3 I's. It's the innovate, imitate, and improve. And a lot of comments about Japan that Japan is not innovative. I beg to differ. Just go to the market at any point in time, and you will see the high level of innovation and innovation/new product development, because again, the 2 words are so interconnected. So bring that, innovate, imitate, and improve. The other advice I would give is, especially in my current role, working with a lot of companies wanting to enter Japan, and they come with a mindset of a very prescriptive mindset. This is what you do. This is how you do it. Instead of,
or this is how we do it at headquarters.
This is how we do it in.
And
yes, those are.
This is how we're going to do it in Japan,
so it's
right?
very prescriptive, and I would say try to be instructive and inclusive. Inclusive meaning tell them what is happening outside. Tell about your own thinking, and don't be. The other thing is, don't be afraid to show your vulnerabilities. I admire what was done with Amazon and how Jeff Bezos built it up. And there is one comment in the book Amazon Unbound, which is the second one after the first one, and there were 20 years in between. And there's one thing that he believes in, and I think it's brilliant, is don't be the know-it-all, be the learn-it-all. And that would be one of my shared thoughts, not advice even. I don't want to go there, but that to me is one thing that I see missing a little bit. And the other thing is, again, going back to learning. Sometimes you are knocking on the wrong door because you think that's the key decision maker. And again, people from outside Japan, they don't want to understand it. They don't want to learn it. They don't even know about it. But after time, you learn that the Suntory Group holding, the Itochu Group, the 7&I Group, and we can go down the list, the Mitsubishi Group. It's this. And sometimes you need to knock on a different door to get to the door that you want to get. And understand that amazing interconnectedness, interwovenness, and then you will understand which door to knock on. And the final thought, not final, but I have many thoughts. So.
Tons of notes there. You prepared well.
Yeah, yes. One thing is bring your solutions, not to the business, but to Naoko-san. Understand that behavior, and part of that understanding is your distribution channel. I have quite a few clients in the FMCG sector, and we need to be in convenience stores. We need to be in all 3 major ones, and that's why. Again, let me help you with this, because Naoko-san was shopping in Lawson and Natural Lawson mainly. She hardly ever went to 7-Eleven. So again, where you start, where you go first, and then it will spread. Think of the major coffee revolution that 7-Eleven brought in, and that brings me to the innovate and imitate. Imitate. Starbucks is a great success in Japan. They are offering coffee. McDonald's was and is now a great success, offering coffee. Why don't we? They did it. In the first year, their very first year with coffee, they sold 43 million cups of coffee. Again, the scale of the Japanese market can be mind-boggling, but don't look at that. Look at the piece by piece, because that's how you will get to that number. But the moment imitate, the other chains saw this success. Lawson, Family Mart, at that time even A&P or the Circle K group, they introduced coffee.
All copied it straight away.
Imitate and improve. And now you go into any of these stores and you have a variety of different coffees from all over the world, the promotions of this type of coffee, that type of coffee. It's almost like the real life Caldi, which is another amazing chain. So again, the mice who managed to kill an elephant, and then the head of the mice, he says, so how are we going to eat it? And then the marketing director says, piece by piece. And yes, your vision is the elephant, but how you get there is piece by piece. Probably it's a culturally inappropriate comment of eating something and killing something, but again, it's we
get the point.
How you get there, and that's the other learning, that the other message that I like from Jeff Bezos is the every day is day one.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, isn't it?
I think it's one of the most brilliant business ideas. It's an interesting
slogan, but to actually, and this would be another entire podcast, how to drive that slogan into the minds of people that actually every day is day one and we start again. That's a hard one to do. Well, Bela, we could keep going.
Just one final comment on that one.
But yes, give me one more comment.
The day one. You are a highly accomplished martial artist, a 6th degree or 6th dan black belt. I have a 1st degree black belt in Taekwondo. Our master very often reminded us, and sometimes when a black belt was doing something not to his liking, of course not demoting the person, but he said, put on your white belt and go back to the beginning. And I think that's an amazing mentality, and that is, I think, what you need to bring with yourself, that no matter how high you are, go back to, from time to time or even every day, go back to, okay, this is first my white belt, and then what I went through to get to that. And that amazing, what is your profile says 46 years of martial arts training. That's amazing. That's dedication, that's passion.
That's the beginner's mind, isn't it? Yes. Same idea. Well, Bela, I could just keep going with this endlessly, but we've got to pull it up somewhere. So
yes, sure.
Thank you very much. This is fantastic.
My pleasure,
today.
Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So please join us again
for
our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.